Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and we are the Astrology Star Sisters. Welcome to our show. Why is the slides? Can you guys see how the slides are discolored, or is it just me?
It looks fine to me.
Okay. Well, I have joining me today Joy Vernon and Madam Simon. Welcome, both of you. Thanks for joining today. And we're going to talk about astrology and tarot for the
All right.
Libra season.
All right.
So, Joy is an astrologer, tarot reader, and Reiki master, and her website's joyvernon.com. And Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, visionary artist, and her website is iconalchemy.com. And I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, an astrologer, author, and intuitive, and my website is alightpath.com. Today we're talking about Libra season, so we're welcoming in autumn equinox or fall equinox. So Joy, would you like to start with Libra?
Yeah, sure. So, Libra is cardinal sign. It's beginning. It begins the fall season. It initiates, creates, begins, activates, germinates, which is maybe more of a spring sounding word, but it's the idea of getting started with something. It's ruled by the planet Venus. The air element is known for being adaptable. It references thoughts, beliefs, and communication, logic, curiosity, focus, clarity. Those are all really good air words that we can add in for our Libra understanding. The mantra is I relate or I balance. Keywords can include partnerships, balance, the diplomat, harmonizing disparate things, awareness of others, love, beauty, romance, negotiation, symmetry, and fairness. And its caution is maybe indecisive. Libra is famous for being indecisive or equivocating. Libra is really good at seeing all sides to an issue or having feeling the validity of everybody's opinions. And so they're very good at making well-informed decisions, but because they need to be thoroughly informed on the matter before they make a decision, they can end up being indecisive. And so the only other thing I thought about maybe adding here to Libra is I don't know if it's a caution. They can be very pleasure seeking, and I think that can be a caution in that they can just get caught up in doing fun, enjoyable things like all the time and having trouble getting back to work sometimes or something.
Would you like to add anything, Simon?
So sometimes Libra can get accused, whether it's valid or not, of being very surface oriented because of the concern with things being beautiful and harmonious, at least on a social level. Okay. And again, going back to what Joy just said, there is that kind of fun seeking behavior. Libras, I have heard described as the show ponies of the zodiac, with all that entails. And so they can be performance oriented on that kind of surface level, which is not the same as, say, the performance orientation of Aries or of Capricorn.
Yeah, one of the things I find about my Libra friends is that they are just the best at really keeping a conversation going and bringing in every voice. And every Libra friend I have will go around the room and be like, what's up with you today? Oh, what's up with you today? And they'll really include everybody. That's like my favorite thing about Libras, because so many other people just let the conversation go as it may, which is great and works well in a lot of situations. But if you've got like a disparate group of people, Libra will really make sure everybody is included. And I love that about them.
I would agree.
Big social butterfly energy.
So the sun's ingress into Libra at 0 degrees Libra forms a grand trine in the air element, a kite to Saturn and Neptune with Uranus and Pluto. The outer planet bisextile is an ongoing pattern for several years. Sun in a loose conjunction with Mercury and Moon. Mars in Scorpio squares Pluto in Aquarius. Venus in Virgo squares Uranus in Gemini. And Mars sextile Venus and Uranus trine Pluto for a trapezoid shape. I hadn't heard that one, so I'm going to learn something new today. So, Joy, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here, and so we're going to kind of uncover these things as we go. I really liked geometry when I was in high school, so I'm like, cool, that makes a trapezoid. It must mean something. I wonder what. So I looked it up. So this is new to me too. It was actually hard to find a lot about that, but I think I did come up with I found enough references and enough ideas that I'm like, I think we can start to put something together here. So, but I saved it for later. So we're going to get started. So that's something to look forward to, preview time. I think we're going to start with my favorite thing that we love discussing, at least I do, which is this ongoing bisextile with the outer planets and how anything that passes through that first decan of Libra activates that. And for the most part, the last few degrees of Virgo as well. And the reason this is important primarily is what I'm seeing is that, you know, it's showing up in people's solar returns. If there is a transit at the time of their solar return, or if they are the last few degrees of Virgo or the first few degrees of Libra. So the people that are coming in for their birthdays right about now, it's all like, this is your solar return. This energy is not just right now, it's really gonna last for the year. So those are a few things that are causing my great interest in this particular configuration.
And also anyone being born right now.
Oh,
is getting that stamp on their chart.
Yes, exactly.
So which one do you want to go to next? Or do you want me to change slides? I'm not sure.
Yeah, go ahead and change slides.
Could I mention something before we do that? Sorry. Just like a day or two before this ingress, we actually saw a triple yod going on, which is why I wanted to bring that up. We see it's residual still with the yod that is pointing from Neptune and sextile Uranus pointing to Mars. The one that is now out of orb, but was still going then, like a day or two ago, is actually it's right now while we're talking. Holy moly. Right. Okay. Is the sextile from Pluto to Neptune pointing to Venus. And then that Mars Venus sextile forms another yod pointing to the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So 3 overlapping yods this weekend right before the sun's Libra ingress. And I think there's still some kind of, residual energy effectively going on from that. Transits don't just stop suddenly.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So we have the tarot cards. So sun in the first decan of Libra is the 2 of Swords. And that decan ruler is the moon, which is the high priestess. And then the major arcana associated with Libra is justice or adjustment. So I'll let Joy tell us about the Rider-Waite-Smith first.
Okay, yeah, and so this is our first decan of Libra card. Is that 2 of Swords. And I mean, those Libra keywords just immediately come out when you look at this card. The idea of balance is very strong here. The title of the card is peace, and peace restored, coming back into balance, coming back into peace. And so just and that's very appropriate for something ruled by Venus, you know. And even the symbol of the sword is a Mars symbol, but to, you know, give this into a Venus ruled sign, it's just like Mars would use that sword to separate. Venus is trying to bring it back into balance, bring it back to that place of peace. And with the moon rulership, I see that in all the water that's behind this person. And I think of the eyes, because they gather information, I think of them as facts, and I think of the swords as facts as well. And so the moon ruling this is really nice with that blindfold over the eyes, because when you can't see all the facts, when you can't see everything, you have to turn inward to the intuition, and that's going to be the moon. And so you know, really nice. And that can, when our mind is trying to explore every different, where do I get all of my information? Because as Libra, I want to consider every fact before I make my decision. This reminds us that sometimes we just can't see everything, and to find our balance, to come back in to that intuitive place and inner place that the moon represents. And then with the Justice card itself, it's same thing, the scales to represent the balance. And it works just very, very, very solidly with the Libra symbolism. I don't think I have to go into it too much more.
And then Simon will tell us about the Thoth deck cards.
Something's kind of, again, you know, I tend to leapfrog off of what Joy has talked about, but you know, the moon in Libra, remember that the moon, it fluctuates, it governs the seasons and cycles of things, okay? And it does relate to our intuitions, but also to our instincts, to our knee-jerk reactions, to our conditioned behavior from early childhood, right? The moon can very much relate to that inner child energy, okay? And so in Libra, then, there is an instinct for balancing things. Sam Reynolds has said that Libra sees beauty at the molecular level. I also think that applies then to balance and to fairness, to justice. We have peace here, but no peace before justice, right? We've got these swords that are both equal together. Okay, that equality is necessary for them to come together, and they come together within this. There is this blue rose that is at the center of this image, and a blue rose does not exist in nature. It is an ideal. Okay, and so they are coming together within this idealized notion of love, but they are doing so from this fair and equal standpoint. Now, if we go down to the adjustment card here, we see this figure who is standing on their tippy toes, balanced on either side of the point of that sword. And they have this headdress on with these big heavy scales are coming off of the headdress. Okay. And so this requires a state of great stillness, concentration, centeredness. One of the problems for Libra is that Libra can get very easily thrown off balance because they're so finely tuned to what is balanced and harmonious. Okay. And so this is both, you know, the strength and the caution for Libra here. is that need to, okay, if you're going to do the Libra stuff, you got to get real calm and clear and centered. You can't be thrown off by a disorder around you, which is real easy for Libra to do. Libra does not like things to be messy. And, you know, a Libra who is very distressed by that messiness is going to climb the walls to try to, get things to be smoothed over and pretty again. Okay. But this card is the reminder, you can't just snap your fingers and make things equal and fair, right? There is that need to get real calm and clear and centered.
And I just wanted to make a comment that the Thoth deck reverses the 8 and the 11. So if people are wondering why in the Rider-Waite it's 11 and then the Thoth it's 8, they reverse those two cards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Golden Dawn, we should place blame where it properly belongs. The Golden Dawn reversed it from the Tarot de Marseille order, and Crowley moved it back. And there's really nice reasons for both orders, but the reason the Golden Dawn moved it, and that's I just kind of said, because I was like, oh, I'm not going to get into this. I'm just like, you can see that the Justice is a really good card for Libra, and that's literally why they moved it, because when you all the astrological correspondences for the cards are based on the astrological attributions in the Sefer Yetzirah for the Hebrew letters. When you put the cards out in order, match them up to the Hebrew letters, you get strength with Libra, and you get justice with earlier with Leo. And obviously strength obviously goes with Leo, and justice obviously goes with Libra. That's just one of those that was so obvious that the Golden Dawn is like, well, let's just move these two around. But there's really valid and important reasons for doing it the way that the Tarot de Marseille had established, and older traditions had established as well. So it's just one of those really fun things to play with.
Thanks for clarifying that. So we have a grand trine in air. So you want to jump in, Joy? Or
yeah, so this has been going on, and we talked about this, I think, back in our, I think it was our Leo discussion. We had Mars going through this 0 point of Libra at the time, and it was opposite to Saturn. And so as you can see there in the past, week or so, and we had Mercury going through at that 0 degree of Libra, and then the moon in the past day or whatever has gone through at that point as well, and now the sun is in there. And so, and we're just going to continue to, Venus will go through there next. And so we're really into it right now with getting that 0 point hit. And what happens, as you can see in the illustration, is it turns that outer planet bisextile or minor trine into it adds the grand trine and air to that minor trine, forming the Kite configuration. And when we talked about it before, we were thinking of that grand trine in air as maybe the efforts towards a whirlwind, and the idea of air's thoughts, it's communication, it's our ideas, it's the speech that we use. And you'll notice it's just like, I'm like, one, why am I so obsessed with this? And two, why does it seem so important right now? And what I discovered, I was just like, well, I should compare it to the US chart. And so when I pulled up the Sibley chart, which is the July 4th, 1776 chart, the US has its midheaven at 1 degrees of Libra. So are our words turning into whirlwinds and tornadoes? And is everything out of balance with that right now? Yeah, there's a lot going on. And then, and like I said, it affects each of us on a personal level as well. The other thing I noticed as I was looking ahead into the sun's transit through Scorpio is that as Mars moves forward in Scorpio, it's going to come into a grand water trine with Jupiter and Saturn. And so all of the heavy, big air stuff that's going on now, we're going to see a shift sometime next month as that moves in to a very emotional water trine. So I'm really interested to see how all of this plays out and how our thoughts and ideas clarify with the free flow of water, or probably more likely get muddy and murky and a feeling of sinking and drowning. If you can be in your intuition and in the flow, it probably will feel like a release, but if you can't, it might feel very, very frustrating.
So we've actually had something going on underneath the surface that folks who are more attuned to the less obvious, shall we say, maybe have been experiencing. We're recording this during eclipse season, right? During the eclipse portal. And the lunar eclipse trined Jupiter and Black Moon Lilith and Juno, who are in Scorpio. And that trine is still going on with the North Node, where the eclipse was, or, close to where the eclipse was. So, and Lilith is definitely things that are, kind of hidden, that are not part of mainstream consciousness, right? She represents the alienated or demonized feminine. But with Juno has definitely been showing us some kind of, the hidden power dynamics within the social fabric, within our relationships, within our commitments, and within our institutions. And so I feel like that has been a foreshadowing, when Mars and Jupiter and Saturn all get together in that grand water trine formation, they're going to be a lot more obvious about it. Okay, because it's two malefics with Jupiter making them bigger. Right now, that water trine is still this kind of subtle, hidden influence under the surface of things. But bring both malefics into it, and it's going to get much more obvious. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting kind of shifting that's going on. That this grand air trine now is operating against that backdrop, and is, as you said, it's going to shift into much more obvious water energies come October. The sun here at that tail point of the kite, with a kite, the head of the kite looks like, it's showing you where it's going, but it's actually the tail that is steering it, right? And so here we have the sun has stepped into that tail position. It was Mars that had previously been there. Action, will, our drive, our energy. But now it's the sun coming on the heels of Mercury. Mercury, our thoughts, our ideas, our information processing. That was what moved through that point next after Mars. Now the sun is shining the light of consciousness there. And remember, it's this formation is all in relation to that minor grand trine, to that bisextile of the outer planets. Okay. And so I'm thinking, this is like we got all three of those outer planets in cahoots doing their stuff together. And we've kind of seen it as like there's been these big forces at work in the world, in society, on these levels that it's difficult for us as individuals to be able to clearly see them. So right now is a very good time for us to be informing ourselves, okay? And really, like, shining some light on those big societal forces and on those transpersonal forces that are shaping the world, regardless of whether or not we as individuals, want to go in that particular direction, right? So this is a real time for us to get discerning.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm loving this. Do you happen to know what degree Lilith is at in Scorpio right now?
Let me see. I think she is around, let me think, 20, maybe 22. Let me think. 22. Just looked her up. Yep.
Okay, interesting. It's kind of close to the ascendant of this chart, interestingly. The other thing, everything is always cycles, right? And so we're always watching for those. And Jupiter, watching the square between Jupiter and Saturn is going to be a little bit more the usual way of looking at things. But nevertheless, it is interesting to note when we get this kind of this upcoming grand trine in water will be Saturn retrograde. And so, but Jupiter wouldn't have caught up when Saturn went through the first time. And so it's catching up now as Saturn retrogrades through there. And then I assume, unless I forget, it's retrogrades. I think it's in Saturn retrograde again together like they did last year. They were in they were in the middle of Pisces and the middle of Gemini. And I think they retrograde again, but now Jupiter's ahead in Cancer. But at any rate, this, Jupiter and Saturn met and started their cycle in Aquarius. And that is the start of those two planets meeting up in air signs for a good long time. And so going through this opening trine after they did the opening square last year, going into that opening trine now, and having Mars join that as Jupiter will move eventually towards its opposition to Saturn. There's something very, again, it's we've got the grand trine in air right now. We're going to be coming into the grand trine in water. It seems like that is a brief kind of recapitulation of this larger cycle that's going on between Jupiter and Saturn. And that a conjunction in air is leading to an opening trine in water. And so I'm very curious about the layers of this. There's a lot to be said for it. I just read a book by a Scottish fantasy author from the 19th century named George MacDonald. He was a theologian and a fantasy writer and was a big influence. You like him? All right.
I grew up on him. He was my favorite when I was a kid.
Oh my God, that's awesome. I just discovered him and I've already read like 4 books and downloaded a couple more. So he was a big influence on J.R.R. Tolkien and on C.S. Lewis, and really fabulous writer. And he's got a book called Lilith. And one of the main things that happens now it's not a feminist book. I want to make that clear. Although I think it's fairly compassionate towards Lilith. But one of the main things that happens towards the climax of the book is this large barren desert fills with water. And it happens, and water can be a symbol of the spirit, of the flow of spirit, of spirituality, and that's how he's using it. But it also can be a symbol of the feminine, and recognizing the mythology of the feminine as guardians of waters and wells. The idea of this masculine air energy and this feminine water energy and the interactions that they're having right now, I think there's quite an interesting, again, pattern building and sequence unfolding with this.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And then you also mentioned here about Jupiter is transiting the U.S. natal Mercury at 24 degrees Cancer. It's applying to that right now. So
yeah, and yet again, the U.S. Mercury is in Cancer. I do believe it's retrograde, which explains so much. It is the U.S.'s communication is watery and intuitive and emotional. And Jupiter is augmenting that right now. And it's yet another iteration of as Mercury communication. Air is normally Mercury's preferred element, and Jupiter, which does like water, it's exalted in Cancer, and it rules Pisces. And those coming together, water and air, emotions and thoughts. So just a lot of reiteration of this, and how can we balance these? How do we integrate them? How does one flow into the other and back? Those are all the questions that I think are coming up right now.
2 things about that. One, Jupiter with the U.S. Mercury, it's not simply our communication, it's how we process information. That the United States as a whole processes information emotionally.
It makes so much sense with social media. Yeah.
Right. But also, it should be noted that the U.S. IC currently has Neptune hanging out with it. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we should recall is that Neptune, Neptune certainly has, a spiritual overtones to it. So we see spiritual or religious concerns heightened with these transits. Remember, Jupiter also relates to faith, relates to religion. Okay.
Yeah.
But also, Neptune dissolves. And the IC, of course, it relates to our foundations, right? Our roots in the psychic soil, where we come from. Okay. So Neptune here, for people who are feeling like, I know that this is going through the zeitgeist right now. There's lots of people like, is the United States going to remain a thing? Okay. There's you got Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about, a national divorce, and people talking about secession and all that other kind of stuff. And I think that's where that's coming from, is it's connected to that transit that's going on. And again, with the sun opposing Neptune, there's now that okay, we got to do our best to be discerning. And remember that Neptune brings confusion. Neptune clouds the issue. And so it's important to remember that we may not be seeing clearly right now. and with the sun at the 0 degree of Libra, there is that reminder from what I said before, that to truly do the Libran stuff of being equal, of being concerned with justice, of being concerned with peace, that you got to get clear and calm and centered, and not let the folks running around with their like chickens with their heads cut off dictate the discourse, right?
Yeah, and this. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
This is Simon and me. We're just like, yeah, and this too. It's so cool. No, I forgot what I was going to say. I had 2 or 3 things, so I'll do the ones that I remember. And this is one of our main things is the Saturn. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The equinox chart covers a 3-month, just like the vernal equinox covers the year ahead, each subsequent. So when we did our solstice one, that covered from the summer solstice to now. And so this will cover the time period from now until the winter solstice. And so it really is, it's not just a month ahead chart like most of them. It's going to cover a 3-month segment. And so this, it's like, kind of like, well, yeah, the sun's going to go through there, and a day or 3 that it's going to be in orb, but because it's there now, it really is an energy that is going to last for at least a few months here for all of us, but also because it's hitting the US chart for us in the US particularly. And then at the same time, the other thing we're constantly looking at now is that loose at this time Saturn Neptune conjunction that will finally perfect next year in February at 0 degrees of Aries. And it's just one of those things. I love watching the planets because Neptune just stayed ahead of fast moves. Saturn is so much faster than Neptune, and Neptune just stayed ahead of it all the way into the 2nd degree of Aries before they both turned back. So that conjunction has been around, and it's not going to perfect until February, and it perfects at 0 degrees of Aries, which is the starting point of the zodiac. It is the point of creation and of individuating, of birth out of the gestation of Pisces. And so these are big energies. These are very big energies. And anytime something is activating them, we're seeing rumbles of, what is the Yeats poem about what rough beast slouches towards Bethlehem, and they're saying like something, what will be born, very, very, very powerful energies of birth and death are very powerful energies.
Right. And those energies of birth and death are at the USIC right now. And will be. And that's like that big conjunction is going to happen right there. So I think the important thing for us to remember with regard to when we're dealing with big birth and death energies, the birthing process is not a gentle one. Okay. And so it's easy for people to get scared, okay, when you're facing those kinds of energies. And so it's important to remember some things in order to not get caught up in fear and making decisions from the standpoint of fear. Because making decisions from the standpoint of fear is not actually going to protect us. It tends to be lopsided. It does not have the balance of Libra. Okay, that discerning sun in Libra is like the reminder. Okay, yes, there are things that we can be afraid of, and we can do our best to address those fears, but we need to address them with the antidote to fear, which is love. Okay, which is interesting when you look at Saturn and Neptune together. Because Saturn, of course, shows us our fears and our insecurities. Saturn is like, oh man, it's all going to go bad, okay? And Neptune is spirituality, but is also considered to be the higher octave of Venus and is associated thus with love. And Venus, of course, is the ruler for Libra. Okay. And what do we have? We've got that. Remember, I talked about that series of yads. Okay. That goes back to what are we focusing on? Because that's what a yad really does. It focuses our attention, it puts pressure on the apex planets for yad. So, the yad that was formed by Venus and Mars pointing to that Neptune, okay, is like, let's work on cultivating our love, our compassion, our spiritual awareness, and our big vision. And at the same time, not get too caught up in, like, say, confusion, glamour. Glamour shows up with Neptune. Deception can show up with Neptune, right? So it goes back then to that sun that asks us to be discerning. And then, of course, both Venus and Mars were at the apex of yads, coming off of the sextiles that are in that bisextile. Okay. And so that puts pressure on us to connect. Venus is the connective principle, and to act. Okay. To assert our will in a way that is mindful of the need to connect. And now Mars, we see Mars having just entered domicile in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio is no longer under Venus's control, or control is not quite the right word, no longer in Venus's home, right? No longer having to abide by Venus's rules. Mars in his own domicile can be very driven, very focused, very intense, okay? But also has this profound strength of will, okay? And so, these two together, that connective principle and that willpower to get things done, focusing then at the apex on that Neptune, that is, keep your higher vision alive. But going back to that sun, the release point of that yad is be discerning. Be discerning and be fair.
I love that, and that fits so thoroughly into all of the Libra. I mean, all of this stuff is so important for understanding this Libra energy and how powerful it is. And going back to the tarot card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Justice card holds that sword straight up on her right hand side, and on her left hand side she holds those scales down, and the path that she is on the tree of life is connects from the center of the tree, number 6 Tiferet, up to number 5 Gevora. And Tiferet is harmony and balance and beauty. and Gevora is severity, and it is strictness, and it is it breaks down things. It's ruled by Mars, and the sun, Tiferet is the sun, and that is the balance and the harmony. And so her scales reach down to Tiferet, the sun, harmony, beauty, and her sword reaches up to Mars, Gevora, severity, what needs to be broken down. And you mentioned the idea of love and fear, and love is literally one of the names for Hesed. Number 4, Jupiter, which is blue and associated with the element water. And number 5, its alternate name is Pakad, which is fear. Number 5, it's red, it's Mars, it's fire. And so, and one of the cool things, and that path is the path of Leo, of the Strength card. And it is the paths in the Crowley deck are the same there. He didn't change those two. He changed the numbers, but not the paths. So Lust goes across from Hesed to Gevora, and Adjustment still goes from Tiferet to Gevora. And so Hesed is love, and that's a balanced path. That's the horizontal path that goes from love to fear.
Yeah.
And justice goes from the center path to fear or severity. And one of the things that's so important to remember is that finding the center balance is, justice has to have a little bit of that severity in it, a little bit of that fear, a little bit of that martial strictness in order to truly achieve balance. It's not a total negotiation between equals. It is coming from that center and has to be influenced by the sword that she holds up. To me, it's kind of complicated. We want things to be balanced all the time, and there is a little bit of an imbalance to this that I think is very, very relevant and very important to see. And we can think of Mars, like you said, the expression of will. There is we have to have a certain intention and will behind how we determine fairness. And it's hard to do. It's a hard, difficult path to follow.
Right. Two small things about that, and then we really probably should go on. That sword raised up and the scales down, to me, is very much as above, so below. Okay. Which speaks to intention and honing our will into our intention, and vice versa, to then enact what we need to in the material world, right? But the other thing I would like to point out is that Saturn, who governs fear, among other things, right? Fear and hardship and all that. Saturn is exalted in Libra. Okay. And so, and the sun just recently opposed Saturn before moving into this ingress, okay, and is still in orb at the time of this ingress to that opposition. And so again, that gives us a sense of what do we do to counterbalance the fear, okay? We put Saturn in that context, that Libran context, where Saturn is exalted. And why is Saturn exalted in Libra? Well, among other things, Saturn is Lord of time, Lord of boundaries, Lord of endings, okay? And so Saturn reminds us, among other things, we can't sit and waffle about the decision forever. Okay. Saturn also reminds us that good relationships require good boundaries and sometimes require that we be willing to end things, to cut things off. Not because we don't care, but because we do care and we don't want something toxic to continue.
Well said. So we have the tarot cards for the Grand Air Trine, and I'll let Joy begin with the Rider-Waite-Smith.
So the last time we talked about this, I hesitate. I wasn't even sure what to do. Last time we talked about it, we looked at the major cards that are associated with this. So I thought, well, why don't we just pull the minor cards this time? And so these are the cards for the first decans of those air signs. And I put Libra first since it's our ingress. And so we've got the 2 of Swords for the first decan of Libra, and the 5 of Swords for the first decan of Aquarius, and the 8 of Swords for the first decan of Gemini. And the Fool, I thought we'd throw the Fool in because he is the element air. He also doubles as Uranus, but originally he was associated with the correspondence of the element air. And so we can see, obviously, like the very first thing you notice is like, oh, these don't look good. These are hard cards. These are difficult. Swords are associated. They're like, we like to take a elegant kind of heightened is the word I want, heightened approach to them, and see them as thoughts and communication and clarity and focus. But the truth of the matter is, swords are our troubles, there are difficulties, there are challenges. And so, you know, if you're going to have some problems, they're probably going to show up in the sword suit. And we start off here with that 2 of Swords, which is one of the nicest of the swords cards. 2, 4, and 6 are going to be your good ones in the suit, and the ace, and finding that balance. And then we go immediately into the 5 of Swords, defeat, and the 8 of Swords, shortened force. And the idea of how I think a lot of the swords cards ask us to explore how we deal with the trouble that each one represents. And I think that comes out a lot in this middle card, the 5 of Swords. It's like, you know, how do you deal with a loss? And, you know, one guy is just picking up the swords and like, well, at least I got some swords out of this. I'm picking up the pieces, you know, I'm cleaning up, and I'm just going to take what I can and go on. And one guy is in the background by the water mourning. He's got his head down in his hands. And some people deal with loss that way. And I like the guy in the middle because he's walking towards the guy in the back, and there's our Libra. He talked to the first guy, how are you doing? What's going on? You know, how do you feel? And now he's walking to the other guy. It's like, okay, how do you feel? What's going on? And that is that sense of, I want to help, I want to connect, I want to establish relationships. And these are all ways of looking at loss. And then we go to our 8 of Swords there. And I like to call this card the sensory deprivation chamber, because it's ruled by Jupiter in Gemini. It is too many thoughts, too much noise. And so she has reduced all of that external clamor by doing the blindfold, controlling her physical body, and letting herself delve into her own truth, her own clarity, her own inner simple, unified voice instead of the clamor of all of the external. And so, you know, I think, again, there are a lot of solutions that we can see in these cards. But when we add the Fool in, he's very much like, let's take a chance. There was another thing I love. This George MacDonald's books, so good that he had an image. It was just a line that he talked about. This one character kept getting caught in dreams, and he thought to himself, well, the one way I've always woken up is by falling. And so he found a deep hole and rolled into it so that he would fall and wake up. And what do we have with the Fool? He is about to fall off this cliff. And the idea that just like opened up the Fool for me when I read that. I'm like, that is why the Fool falls, is so that he can wake up. And that just applies so beautifully to these cards as we take that risk in order to wake up, see our troubles, see what is truthful about those, and learn how to manage them, what response we have to them, and how we are going to solve them.
And then Simon, will you go over the Thoth cards for us?
Okay. So, looking at this trio, I mean, Joy is right. They do very much relate to our troubles, right? But we've got something kind of interesting going on here. We've got, with that first card, that Two of Swords, things looking to be in harmony. But that blue rose, that's an ideal and an impossibility. It does not exist in nature. Real life is messy. Okay. And so we go there into the Five of Swords. Fives, of course, are the trials of man. Okay. In all of the suits. But this card specifically, what do we have? We've got Venus, the ruler of Libra, in Aquarius, which is a place that, like, it's interesting because Venus is connective, Venus is social, and Aquarius is very concerned with the well-being of the group, with the well-being of all. Okay. And yet, why do we see that defeat? That keyword there, we've got these swords, they have torn apart the rose of love and are forming that downward facing pentagram, which very much relates to matter over spirit. Okay. So that on one hand, we can see that kind of pleasure seeking impulse of Libra as being something that may get stuff out of balance. But the other thing, there's this kind of sort of insidious thing that can happen with Libra, which is that in the effort to be quote unquote fair, in the effort to bring about social harmony, Libra can sometimes make of themselves a doormat. Okay. They can elevate the needs of others in order to make things look nice and harmonious, in order to keep the peace, quote unquote. Okay. This can become people-pleasing behavior, capitulating to others rather than actually asserting one's own needs. And the problem is that is not actually fair. Okay. And yet, in this effort to make things look pretty on the surface, we go, oh, it's only fair if I do this thing that's actually going to put me last, right? And so that is part of that defeat. And what I find it really important to remind people with regard to Aquarius is that the evolution of the group is only possible with the evolution of the individual. Okay. And if we're not caring for each of the individuals within the group as a whole is poisoned by that. Okay. We are only as strong, as evolved, as kindly, okay, as we are in our treatment toward those who are the smallest and lowest among us. Okay. So we then go to our Eight of Swords. Now, this is interesting because we've got these two, once again, these two equal swords that we started out with. Okay. And yet there's all these other swords at cross purposes that are all kind of wonky, and, some of them, they're kind of jagged and curves, and none of them are equal, first of all. But none of them, truly work with those two central swords. They're at cross purposes. Jupiter in Gemini, of course, can bring an overabundance of information. We saw that with Jupiter's transit of Gemini. Okay. We saw, among other things, lots of conflicting information with regard to tech developments. Okay. Lots of misinformation being put out there. But also communication being used to fragment. Communication, certainly more bots on social media. Okay. And so we see here one of the things that Gemini, well, there's two big issues that I can see very much that are cautions for Gemini. One of them is that, oh my goodness, we've got like so much information to process. We get ooh shiny syndrome, scattered squirrel thinking, and we can't really focus. Okay. The other one is the tendency toward gossip. Okay. People talking about things they don't actually know what they're saying, right? Or they don't know what they're talking about, and they're trying to put their opinion in, and they may even have very good intentions. That's the thing. But they are interfering with the freedom, the life path, the fairness for somebody else. Okay. And one of the problems for Jupiter is that Jupiter can very much get into kind of this self-righteous state. Okay. This I know best. Okay. I see, the ideal society and everybody behaves in a certain way. Okay. As opposed to, having a variety of different viewpoints and different ways of existing. Okay. And so, the thing is, those two swords that are hanging out there next to each other, they show us, they hint at getting back to that original piece. Okay. But there is that need then to kind of, okay, I know y'all mean well, or maybe some of you don't, but whatever. Okay. It's none of my business what you actually think. Okay. It's none of my business what you think. So let's push aside some of that chatter. And, what do we do with the Fool? Among other things, we create space. Okay. That 0 is the empty space, the clarity into which now, we can manifest that original piece.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything, Joy?
No, this is all great.
Oh, it's so good. I love all this information. And Joy's brought the US Sibley chart here, so I'll just let you jump in.
Yeah, and I just wanted to have a reference point for this. And so we can see that midheaven at 1 degrees of Libra and the corresponding IC therefore at the 1st degree of Aries. We can see that Mercury retrograde at 24 degrees of Cancer. And those are the main things that I had wanted to mention. Oh, and of course, speaking of air, the U.S. is in its Uranus return. And for people, that happens at the age of 84, I think. And so this is some multiple of that, but I didn't do the math. And so, so yeah, just some very interesting things going on. Other than that, I think we already talked about it, so I don't have anything additional to say. I just want to make sure we had a reference. Do you have anything, Simon, that you want to bring up?
Just the fact that we have also been in the U.S. Chiron return.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chiron is actually retrograding back toward the U.S. Chiron at the moment. I don't believe it's going to actually reach the exact point again, but we are still definitely within the orb of that return, and therefore that is also an influence we should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And Chiron in Aries is very much about identity, but also about capability. Okay, our ability to do things as individuals. And when we're looking at Chiron, one of the things about Chiron is, Chiron shows us the parts that are wounded that we don't know how to handle by ourselves. And so, there is that woundedness and isolation that a lot of individuals are feeling at this time. And of course, then one of the chironic solutions, I mean, Chiron wounds, you kind of have to sit with and recognize that some things may not be able to be solvable. But the solution is actually to talk with others about it. To share one's experiences, and have solidarity with others who are going through the same thing, so that when we are feeling lonely, isolated, incapable, where we are feeling like our identity, maybe a problem in some way, then we need to find others who are going through similar experiences and connect. So that again goes back to that Libran theme. The with a lot of transits, when you're looking at what's going on within that sign, you also need to look to its polarity point in order to see what are possible solutions, what are possible methods for healing, so that there's wholeness between those two polarity points, as opposed to just constantly back and forth between the two, right? That you want to actually have some integration.
Thank you. So then we have the previous air trine with a kite compared to Mars opposite Saturn during the Leo discussion. And you talked about this briefly already. Do you want to add anything, Joy?
No, I just wanted to point that out, that the one we talked about before was Mars opposite Saturn, and that was August 8th of 2025. And if you go to the next slide, I pulled a couple more because I had worked all of this stuff out last year for something, and then I was like, what were all those dates? And so the initial air trine with Kite was on August 22nd of 2023. Guess what planet was there? And this, I believe it was, I think I must have looked for Mars opposite Neptune. Or any planet opposite Neptune or something like that, and found this, and it was Mars that just barely. Again, it's always I get so excited when a slower planet beats a faster planet to something. And Mars beat that Mercury to that opposition and to being the first example of that, of a kite formation. Now this was not in air, this was in Earth, because we still had Pluto in Capricorn and we still had Uranus and Taurus, and so this is the end of Virgo that we've got Mars and Mercury just a few days later coming in and forming that. And so then I've looked up the final one, because I did remember that bisextile goes on through almost the entire first decan of those air signs. And so it actually, this is the final exact air trine with Kite is going to be on July 26, 2027. And guess what makes it a kite again is Mars. And so Mars is weirdly tied in to this construction and unfolding. And it rules Aries, and that Aries point, which is all centered around the birth point. Mars is the surgeon that cuts the cord. Mars is the warrior that reminds us what we're fighting for. And it doesn't like being in Libra, and yet here it is. It has to, this Mars is reminding us to constantly keep our clarity of intention, our motivations, and a balanced motivation as we move forward in this creative process.
I love that you did this and that Mars is so active. It's like, I love these patterns and cycles.
It does seem very much like Mars's will to action is the key to working with that minor grand trine, that bisextile of those outer planets. I do also want to point out that while Mars is in detriment in Libra, right? Mars doesn't like having to do peacemakery kind of things. Mars is, more divisive than connective. And yet, one area where Mars excels in Libra is fighting for justice. Just putting it out there.
I love it. No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And well, I often think when I see, a lot of times when I get those Libra midheavens, I mean, it's so common to say, oh, you're going to work in fashion, or you're going to blah, 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 you're going to work in the justice system. But every once in a while, it's kind of like, yeah, you're going to be doing social justice, and you're really going to be fighting the good fight. I mean, Mars in Libra is literally fighting the good fight.
Yep.
Exactly. Okay, then we have the outer planet bisextile or grand trine, and you've covered that. Do you want to say anything more?
No, I just want to make sure that we got the actual chart up there. This is the 2028. And this, okay, sorry. The last time it was a kite was in 2027 with Mars, and then there were no other kites after that. And this is the actual last gasp of the and I searched on Uranus trine Pluto. And so that's the last time Uranus trines at. Other than that, it moves out of orb, and the retrogrades don't take it within orb anymore. And you can see that that's at 8 degrees, almost 9 degrees for Aquarius and Gemini, and Neptune is still hanging out at 7, almost 8 degrees of Aries. So it really does take us mostly through those first decans of those signs. And then their next trine, where will Uranus and Pluto trine next? In the water signs. So a lot of symbolism that's playing out on, it's all gears, right? It's like fast little gears that are turning quickly, and they're connecting with slower gears. And we're seeing a lot of air and water gears coming up, over 3 months, over, several more years, over, the grandness of the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, and even as Uranus and Pluto come into relationship again, which will be, 30 some years down the road.
Absolutely. Any comment you'd like to make, Simon?
Nope.
So we get to go to the trapezoid. So we're all learning together, and the audience is all learning. This is really exciting. I love it that you brought this forward for us today. Go ahead.
Well, and I made those lines around it very, very heavy, so that because there's already a lot of, the most astrological software, for people that are newer to this, will make a line heavier if the orb is tighter, and the line will be lighter or weaker if the orb is greater, is wider. And so when the lines are heavy, they're more potent. And so I went ahead, and we already had a lot of heavy lines in this because things were pretty close. And so I had to make them very, very heavy to stand out against the already heavy lines we were seeing. And so we've gone back now to our Ingress chart, which is what we started today with. And now we're looking at primarily the squares. And that was Mars in Scorpio square to Pluto. And that's the red line connecting the two of those. And then the red line that connects Venus there in Virgo over to Uranus and Gemini. But Uranus and Pluto have a blue line between them for the trine, and Mars and Venus get a short blue line for the sextile. And to double check the symmetry of anything, you always do the diagonals, and sure enough, these had green lines from Pluto to Venus and from Uranus to Mars. And so that's the defining quality that it really counts as a trapezoid, is that it has those quincunxes in between. And those quincunxes, of course, are the angle that makes up the Yud. And so then it's like, okay, cool, we've got this cool shape. What does it mean? And so I looked it up on a number of, there weren't a lot of sites. So I searched and found some ideas: a negotiation, conciliation, adjustment. I didn't see the word adjustment per se, but I really was starting to get that feeling. And because it's a Libra keyword, I threw it in because they are really trying to negotiate and adjust, kind of fine tune these experiences that they have. And the helpful blue line relationships, which is the sextile between Venus and Mars and the trine between Uranus and Pluto, those are trapped in a greater context of challenges, which are red lines, the squares, and stalemates, which are the green lines or quincunxes. And so, what I ended up thinking about, and you always, whenever you're trying, even if you can't find a single article on the internet or in any book that you own that talks about a certain shape that you find in a chart, you can always discover the answer yourself by looking at the combination of what are qualities that are being expressed. We've got the friendly lines of the trine and sextile, and then these other difficult lines. And so it seems like with that trine between Uranus and Pluto, there is a little bit of a looseness to that, whereas the sextile has a little bit more tight alignment. And so Venus and Mars seem like it's ruled by Empress. I think of the sextile is by the Empress. It's ruled by Venus. I'm just a tarot person at heart. It's ruled by Venus. And so to me, it's like holding hands. You're closer together. You're not like embraced like a conjunction, but you're just walking along holding hands. That to me is the sextile. The trine is tossing a ball. It's like you're still in an easygoing, fun relationship, but there's a little bit more distance. So it started to feel a little bit like maybe a game of keep away where Uranus and Pluto were tossing the ball back and forth, and Mars and Venus were trying to get into it, and were being kept away by those squares and the quincunxes, which the quincunx is also called an inconjunct because nothing's the same. And so Venus is in an earth sign and Pluto is in an air sign. Venus is in a feminine sign and Pluto is in a masculine sign. Venus is in a mutable sign and Pluto is in a fixed sign. It's like, where's the common ground? There is none. And so that's why there's this kind of stalemate energy with those quincunxes. So she can't really get along with Pluto. Likewise, Mars and Uranus can't get along. Mars is at odds with Pluto, and the squares are ruled by Mars. Venus is at odds with Uranus, and yet they have to find their negotiation and their compromise because the symmetry demands that they work together. And so this is that thing, like normally you'd just be like, I don't get along with those people. I'm just going to not play. But you have to because of the symmetry. And so we get Venus having to assist Mars in dealing with Uranus on one angle, and Venus helping Mars work with Pluto on another angle, and then doing that same thing again. One thing that I did come across is that this the geometric shape is a trapezoid. One writer that I came across called it a butterfly or an iron butterfly, and you can see the large wings in the long part of the X and the short wings in the short part of the X. So you can see that butterfly shape, and the iron butterfly is because this particular thing is so tight and locked in place, which is why it feels like those helpful blue lines don't give it any benefit. It has that little bonus of having of being part, that shared trine being part of the bisextile, so we can add Saturn into that. But I was already, there's so many things going on. I'm kind of like, I think that's really important. And the peak of anything, the apex of anything is so often, or even the center line of anything is very important. So I do think it helps to resolve the energies, or maybe give some direction to the energies. But for the most part, and likewise, the sun is also at a midpoint between Venus and Mars. And so we can also include some of that in terms of how to navigate this energy. I think at this point, I'm going to stop a little bit and hear what you guys, if you're familiar with this, what you know about it, what's coming to you right now as you look at it, and see and just hear from some other thoughts on this.
Go ahead, Simon.
So the crisscrossing quincunxes within a larger configuration, there are many variations on that are referred to as a fortress. Okay. Sometimes it's joined by an opposition on one side and a trine on the other. But whatever it is, you're effectively looking at a figure eight made by those quincunxes and then two other aspects. Okay, the squares joining these together just like, give it that extra emphasis of fortification kind of feeling, right? The thing about quincunxes, so Joy mentioned that they're sometimes called inconjuncts, but actually an inconjunct isn't just a quincunx. It can also be a semi-sextile, which is 30 degrees apart. And inconjuncts are effectively any aspect where the two planets cannot see each other. They do not have direct line of sight within the chart. Okay, they're either right next to each other, so they can't actually see each other clearly. Okay, so and so's over here, I'm not looking directly at them, or they're in this space where I don't have a relationship with them by sign, by element, by modality. Okay, so that then makes this a little extra interesting, because that sun that is at the midpoint between Venus and Mars is also semi-sextile Venus and Mars. Okay, our discernment is in a place where it cannot clearly see the two personal planets that are sort of the operating players here. Those outer planets are more steady and stable in their position, right? They take longer to move. But the Venus Mars, those are the ones that move into this position to then interact with those outer planets. Okay. And that sun there is in between them at the midpoint, which is definitely a sensitive point, and yet can't clearly see them. Okay. Which I feel like that adds to some of the potential confusion that we see with the sun opposing Neptune, right? It also means that we have to, kind of feel our way around and figure things out in ways that we wouldn't normally. And why do I say that? Well, because one of the things about working with quincunxes is that in order to try to integrate these two very different energies, right, you need to try to figure out, where is there common ground? Is there any common ground between them? Now between Venus in Virgo and Pluto in Aquarius, I can actually more easily see the common ground. Venus is not Venus, sorry, Virgo is uh, associated with purity, right? And Aquarius can be associated with idealism, which is a form of purity. Okay. I have a harder time seeing the common ground between the Scorpio and the Gemini, except Gemini is information processing on a mental level, whereas Scorpio processes emotions. It's processing emotional information rather than logical or intellectual information. Okay. And the thing about quincunxes is you can often feel like it's kind of this seesawing energy back and forth as you try to get each planet's needs met, each of those signs to be able to somehow be integrated, each of those energies to work together. And so that process of trying to find common ground between things that look like they should not get along, I think is a big theme for this particular, not just this configuration, but this moment in time. Okay. That is alchemical work. That is breaking things down into their constituent parts, solve et coagula. Break them down into their constituent parts and then try to figure out ways to put them back together in a new form that is more true to what is at our core, as opposed to all the weird stuff that we've piled on top and obscured the truth with. So
Well, and it makes me think of that there's a lot of restrictions, kind of a Saturnian around it, feel for it. And it reminds me Years ago, when I lived in Puerto Rico, we didn't have electricity and we wanted to get electricity, but there was a problem. Well, you can have electricity, but you have to figure out how to get the poles. And it's like, no, this isn't there, so you can't have this. And then it would be another problem. And well, you can't have this because that's not there. So, but the workaround happened that the phone company was expanding and they put in all the phone poles. So then the poles were there, then we could get electricity. But it took several years. It wasn't just an easy fix, but that's what it reminds me of. So it's challenging, but you just, keep working on it and you will accomplish something. So there's lots of effort to be put forward.
That's a great example.
Yeah. That also reminds me of the fact that Venus here is in her detriment. Okay. And when planets are in their detriment, they don't have the resources they're used to working with. So they have to get creative. So that goes back to your example, and we may find ourselves in that position where we're like, okay, I've got to somehow get this done. I have no idea how I'm going to get this done, but somehow I got to be able to think outside the box and come up with something a little different. And I think that's what Uranus is challenging Venus to do there. Okay. And note that Mars, the Mars square to Pluto, is a challenge of will. It's a contest of individual will versus collective will. Okay. So yeah, there's definitely that need to be creative, to recognize that we may not have the resources that we're used to having in order to do certain tasks. And yet these things all still have a relationship together. So we have to figure out how to get them to work together.
Just put in that effort and it'll happen. Let's see, do we have another? Oh yeah, here's the chart with the tarot cards. So Joy, you can start with the Rider-Waite.
Unless we're like desperate for time reasons, I did have one other thing I wanted to say about that, if we could.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
As I continued to kind of toss this around in my mind, the idea that I came up with was the idea of forced perspective for this. And the idea that in two-dimensional art, for instance, you draw the front of the scene or the foreground wider, and then you have these parallel lines like a train track coming into a single point in the distance. And so we get that, and it's useful in theater to create a set where, like, the whole thing where Alice in Wonderland gets bigger and smaller, and or I guess that's through the Looking Glass, where she drinks the drink me bottle and gets bigger, and she eats a cake and gets smaller, or whatever. If you want to stage that, you can use this forced perspective thing to have her at the front of the stage and be normal size, and then go to the back of the stage and look like she's become huge. And so this idea of forced perspective is what is it can be what is my normal perspective and what is the distorted perspective, or it can be what is foregrounded, again, which would be the trine, and what is in the background, which would be the sextile. But because it's a distorted perspective, it seems like the foreground thing would be more important and the background thing would be less important. But due to the laws of drawing that perspective, they're actually equal in value. And I think there's something there that if you unwrapped that trapezoid, you can solve it through recognizing that the Venus Mars is really the thing that is going to, and this is just trying this on for size. I have no idea if this is going to be true or not, so I'm inviting others that have worked with this configuration to like let me know in the comments what it really means. Or to, if you're intrigued by this, to explore it with me and see what it means to you, or if anybody actually has it in a birth chart and has some examples. I just feel like that the Venus and Mars feel like they're in the background and they are smaller and in the distance and not as important. But I think the truth is that those railroad tracks do not come to a point in the distance. They actually are parallel, and Venus and Mars are just as important and relevant to this energy as the Uranus-Pluto trine. Again, I can't take it all the way into a full interpretation, but that is just where my brain has been going with this.
Well, it's excellent, and to introduce something new, some new food for thought and some learning and growth. I love it. So you want to start with the tarot cards, please, Joy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just grabbed the 4 planets at play, and I put the little trapezoid energies over top so that we can keep those in mind. And I use the major arcana as opposed. I could have used I just like to mix it up. I'm like, okay, for the air trine we use the minors. Let's go back to majors. So we've got Mars is the Tower, Venus is the Empress, Uranus is the Fool, and Pluto is Judgment. And so we can definitely see that the Empress is caught up in something very big and scary. Maybe why she is literally out of her element, out of sign, in her detriment. Or actually, sorry, I guess maybe I'm more tired than I thought in her fall. And you can kind of see that with the challenges of the other cards around that. I think the idea of trying to find that each given card in many ways is kind of at odds with everything around it, and yet at the same time the Empress and the Tower have to work together, and the Fool and Judgment have to. They're like the easiest way to try to get the work done. I think that we see the destruction of the Tower and the creation of the Empress kind of coming together there. And literally the start of the cycle with the Fool and the penultimate card, Judgment, which shows a rebirth right there in the card. All of this, like, there's just so much energy going on. And how does the Empress deal with how does she join forces with the destruction of the Tower? I actually did an astrology talk where what was I talking about? I managed to work cards, and I always manage to work cards into everything. And I think I was talking about how to blend symbols together when you're trying to read like a planet and a sign or something like that. And so I use this Tower and Empress together, and the idea of the inseminating force of the Tower and the receptive womb of the Empress. That is a really powerful blend that we have there. And there's certainly other. I think I mentioned that the fire of the Tower can bake the bread of the grain that the Empress rules. Things like that. So there's quite a variety of ways to think about how those work together. And again, their efforts seem to be the thing that allows, tames, and reconciles the the Fool and Judgment, or Uranus and Pluto.
Well done. Well done. Do you want to add anything, Simon, to the Thoth cards?
So, again, bouncing off of what Joy has talked about a bit. But specifically, I'm looking at, the Empress with the Tower. There is that creation and destruction energy, that Shakti and Shiva combination that we see there. One of the things that I very much like to remind people of when they are dealing with tower moments in their lives is that when the tower collapses, when the structure, the institution in our lives is suddenly dismantled, well, we can sweep away the rubble and look at that. Nice new space in which to build. Nice, clean, open space in which to build. And I think that actually goes back to where is that that common ground between Mars and Uranus here, between the destruction of the tower and the disruption of Uranus. The Fool, that 0, is an open space. And the tower, by destroying, clears space in which to create. And then going back to our Venus-Pluto connection via the quincunx. So Pluto here is represented by the Aeon. We have the godchild Horus, Tehuti or Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, and Nut, the sky overarching, the Hebrew letter Shin for spirit. And this card very much relates to what are the patterns? What are the underlying power dynamics? What are you carrying forward from the past that maybe it's now time to let go of? Okay. And as I mentioned before, Venus in Virgo has a purity about her, that clarifying principle. And when we're looking at Pluto, of course, governing cycles of death and rebirth, but also shows us what is ripe for composting. Okay. What needs to be purified? What needs to be cleared away? So I feel like this is huge. This configuration together, when we take all 4 of those together, that is big clearing energy. Make space in which to then create new patterns, new society, new personal life, new habits. Virgo is habits, okay? Create that space in which to then bring that beautiful, loving, abundant Empress energy, okay? If she got no space to operate, she's not going to be doing much. So we got to clear that space first. And yes, that's a risk, the Fool, okay? Yes, it can feel destructive, Mars. Yes, it can be complex, Pluto. Okay. But all of them, I feel like they are, even though it's difficult energy because those squares and those quincunxes, there still is good work to be done here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anything else, Joy?
Well, yeah. Yeah. And the thing that came to mind for me was the tower is not, we're not clearing away the rubble to build again. We're clearing away the rubble to plant.
Oh, yes. Because Venus.
Like, oh.
Empress. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just like you know what, maybe we've built enough. Maybe it's time to dig our feet in the dirt and plant.
Reground. Heck yeah.
Reground, yeah.
That really reminds me of it's something a statistic I read somewhere to the effect that there are more human created things on this planet now than there are living animals and insects, okay, which is insane because insects are like just a huge quantity of beings,
And they're
and
all
so,
and all those things are made of plastic.
yeah. And that's the thing, is that has been, you know, it, on a personal level, that has been making me more mindful about, you know, what do I buy, what do I create, all of that. But what you just said says to me there is a shift in consciousness that can happen that is not about what do we, you know, consume, but what do we grow? And that can be both on physical and metaphysical levels, right? What are we, you know, and I think that's particularly interesting within the context of, you know, prior economic systems, capitalism, whatever, where we've got this notion of like, you know, oh yes, you know, companies must endlessly grow, must endlessly produce, blah 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 blah. But there can be growth that is not about just putting out more stuff. um and instead becomes, you know, what is part of that life cycle, that you know, birth, death, and rebirth. And that once again connects that Venus and Pluto.
Yeah.
Puts
Yeah.
them in a larger context that is much healthier.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see that, and with the trine between Uranus and Pluto is just more. And then the sextile between Venus and Mars is just like how can we all get along? It's just like, how can we keep this simple? How can we put simple things first? How can we put the smaller things first?
Yeah, especially for Virgo, which likes detail and likes the small. The virtue of what is small is very much seen with Virgo.
Yeah, yeah. Love it. Love it.
So would you guys like to do a random draw?
I sure would. I
Let's
got a
see.
new deck
How
too.
do we work with all of this?
How do we work with all this? Yeah. I'm
So,
going to be using the Verdance Tarot, which just came out this month from
Ooh,
Stephanie. I don't know how to say her name, so I'm going to just say Stephanie Law.
Stephanie Queen-Law.
You
I
know
love
it?
her work.
Okay. Yeah. So she's the one that did the Shadowscapes. And so this one is brand new. So what was the question? How do we work with all of this crazy energy? What are we giving birth to? What is the tower collapsing? How do we work with all of this? Our social justice. There's so many things we covered.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I think we can take these card draws as being kind of distilling all of that down into one directive, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that.
and so much wonderful information. Thank you, Joy, for working on the slides with me. I so appreciate that.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
coming up with the trapezoid, I love that. I'm going to look into that more.
Well, that's the 8 of coins, which is a spider, and all the little things that are caught in its web. Let's see if that camera's going to focus a little bit better. And this deck is gorgeous, just like the Shadowscapes. The color profile is a little different, which I like quite a bit. But and there's a lot of this kind of misty, watery looking, so those trees in the background, and there is a little bit of odd perspectives and things. Those trees are we're obviously down towards the roots of those trees and kind of looking up towards them, and they're actually, I don't know if you can see it. They actually have kind of some human shape to the trees. It's
very interesting. It's pretty.
They're really, really pretty. Yeah. And I mean, 8 of coins is Venus's position. So it all comes down on poor Venus's shoulders. That's what it feels like. It feels like all the weight and power behind all of these, everything that we talked about. Venus rules Libra, and she's debilitated there in Virgo. And, you know, in the trapezoid thing, it seemed like she was the one reasonable one in the whole thing, especially when we turned it into cards. And so the 8 of coins, the human figures are helping to weave the spider web, and then the things that are caught in it. I should probably get on some magnifying glasses so that I can see this. But they're red, or not, sorry, they're green and silver and gold. And I don't think, I don't think they're insects, but they do look like bubbles that contain something. So they have almost like an egg-like quality. This deck is super fascinating. And so just this idea of the spider, the weaver, the creatrix, creating this web, this matrix in which these things are planted. And you know, what will you plant? What will you plant? How will you weave? What will you plant? What energies will grow in the matrix that you create?
And be creative at this time, I would say.
Yeah, just be creative. That's always just it's so grounding and so satisfying and all of that too. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, Venus, of course, is a patron of the arts, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that creativity, I think, is a big factor here. I find this very interesting. What I drew was the 6 of Swords, okay? And so that is Mercury, who is Virgo's ruler, which is the dispositor for Venus, right, in Virgo. The 6s, of course, are associated with love and beauty. Okay. So even though this is a swords card, it is backed up by that sense of, among other things, symmetry and order. Okay. It's Mercury in Aquarius, which then relates back to our Pluto-Venus connection in that trapezoid, since Pluto is in Aquarius. And its keyword is science. Okay. So one of the things about science that I think is really important to remind us of is that it is, you know, it's not simply lone wolf behavior, right? It is a collective process in which, yes, you know, somebody comes up with a hypothesis and tests out that hypothesis, and then they come up with their findings and they present their findings to the group for peer review. Okay. And so, you know, even though individual effort may drive it, it comes back to collective consensus understanding of what are the facts. Okay. Now, the shadow side of that, of course, is that, the collective may decide things about the nature of reality that are actually misled. Okay. But within this context, I do feel like this is very much about communicating with each other in fairness, equality. Note those swords are all equal, all coming together. At their center is the rosy cross. Okay, this Rosicrucian symbol, relating to, among other things, rose is love. Okay, it's a connective symbol, also protective, interestingly enough, right? Think about the thorns of the rose, right? And the cross is a symbol of matter. Okay, and so there is, yes, there's communication that is equal, loving. It's your peers, it's your community, but it's also practical because it's engaging in, among other things, planning, as well as ascertaining what is true, what is not, how are we going to structure things. And so I feel like, yes, on one hand, yes, absolutely, let's be creative, but let's bring it back to the community. Okay. The other thing I do want to mention, that because I see it here in this card, but also in Joy's Weaver card, right? What do we see? It's like a big web going on behind that, right? And one of the things about how spider webs operate is that there is this very refined sensing going on when something trips one of those little spider strands. Okay, the spider's all over that, right? And so this suggests the need to refine our awareness, okay? To use that sun in Libra discernment of, what was it that Sam said? Beauty at the molecular level, okay? And that can apply to peace, fairness, equality, harmony, okay? It takes actually the refining sensibilities of Venus in Virgo, Virgo being the predecessor to that Libra. How do you come up with something that is beautiful on many levels? Well, you have to have attention to detail. You have to pay attention to, the habits that we cultivate, the little things, and you have to pay attention to it over time. And so this is the natural progression from Virgo into Libra. Okay. To continue the detailed work that we've been doing in Virgo season, but now apply it on this social level, paying attention to the little things. And doing so, still carrying forward, because Libra's ruler is still in Virgo, right? As has recently entered Virgo, carrying all of that forward with a sense of service. Okay. That service of the connective principle is what draws together the community in harmony. What can smooth over the ruffled feathers? What can help people to all feel equal and like they have gotten a fair shake?
Joy, do you have a comment since Simon has shared her card now?
Yeah, the two things. The cycle, our next cycle, the next thing to hit, that 0 point of Libra, is going to be Venus. And she's going to get her chance to be that. But the other thing that occurred to me is how when you mentioned how sensitive the spider web was, and I thought, well, yeah, but it's also so strong. And I'm like, Mars and Venus. Mars is the strength of it, and Venus is the delicate beauty and sensitivity of it. So in that spider web, we have Mars and Venus working together at their very creative best.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
Excellent. Excellent. I want to thank you both. And I want to thank our audience for joining the Astrology Star Sisters today for us. And now we're going to let Joy share her little advertisement here.
Yeah, and we don't have to spend too much time. This is just one of the many places to find me. I blog, and so you can go to my website to find that, or to my Substack. I think I might have another one in here. I do. So, and this is the same one I had last time, but maybe 2 times now. But it's still my most recent thing, and still my kind of favorite current thing, which is my Alchemical Tower Tableau, a major arcana map to spiritual transformation, and that takes you to a class that you can, like an instantly available downloadable class type of thing.
Simon?
So you can find me on Patreon, where I write about the astrological transits, and I create custom astrological art for my patrons, as well as, weekly or semi-weekly art that relates to the transits. I'm also a consulting astrologer. Like my companions here. So if you wish to schedule a consultation, you can visit me at iconalchemy.com.
And you have a blue rose in your logo.
And like Simon said, I do consultations. I have a newsletter that you could subscribe. And if you like our show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And there's a lot of other shows to choose from. There's an archive to watch, and there's always more shows forthcoming. So I enjoy having you stop by and check us out. And I will be on Talk Cosmos on October 19th, talking about the Libra new moon. You can join us here when I'm on that show. I want to thank our sponsor, Astro Peregrine Software, an astrology software for Mac and Windows. And you can find information about that at astroperegrine.com. And I want to thank Joy and Simon for joining me today. It's been fantastic, and I look forward to next month when we come back. So we're going to say goodbye for now. Bye, ladies.
Bye.